Dr Sharad Paul has spent most of his life trying to understand how our evolutionary past, expressed through our genes, affects our performance, appearance, and what we can do to navigate genetics and our well-being. Put simply, how can we biohack that system? While skin cancer surgery earned him international fame from Auckland over the past 3 decades, Dr. Sharad Paul walks in many spheres, and writing and social enterprise takes up an equal proportion of his time as a physician and skin surgeon. This is the Here Now podcast with me, Kadambari Raghukumar, and today I'm with Dr. Sharad Paul talking about his latest book, Biohacking Your Genes, 25 Laws for a Smarter, Healthier and Longer Life. His parents were medical missionaries who moved back to India from the UK, where Sharad was born, to continue their service in Tamil Nadu in the south of the country. And that's where his story begins.
There were parts of my life I remember going to school, perhaps in a bullock cart, right? So I still remember those things of how, where they were was fairly remote and you didn't really have good schools. I actually had to go to boarding school quite young, right? So when I was in boarding, interestingly, because I had this knowledge of medicines and this and that, this actually only came back to me years later. I'd actually forgotten this. And I actually ran a clinic in my dorm when I was like 11 years old or something like that, right? I had all the stuff. I knew what were painkillers, I knew creams, I knew stuff. So much so that it got so popular that the wardens, the adults, wouldn't go to the local infirmary. They would come to me, right? So everybody called me. So my nickname was always Doc growing up in boarding, right? So probably if I think like that, then I was probably always destined to become one. But literally, funnily enough, after that phase, when I was finishing school, I really wanted to do particle physics and become a scientist in that way. And people in India, everybody felt I was a bit brighter, that I really needed to go to the US to do it early. Like they said, let him go to the US, he needs. But everybody was like, his parents he's already been in boarding so many years, how are we going to send our child off to America and stuff? So it was almost like it's not going to happen. Those days you couldn't travel more easily. You couldn't, convert a rupee out and things like that. So it was pretty much, you were just pragmatic, right? So you weren't. So I was like, okay, if I'm not going, then all right, what else can I do? Or I suppose I may as well do medicine, right?
And he goes on to doing it so well that his skin clinic in Blockhouse Bay absolutely goes off from 1996. He becomes sought after globally for his surgery and skin cancer innovations, and his books take him around the world delivering talks delving into evolutionary biology, genomics and skin. While the pursuit of eternal youth and ageless skin remains a multi-billion-dollar business for medical practitioners and the like, Sharad's reality, he says, was shaped by slightly different circumstances.
I always tell my parents that they sort of screwed me up in the fact that I should have been this big businessman making multi-millions, because when I travel internationally, people who are working in my field are able to do the things I can do. Their businesses are thriving because they're able to focus on, making money, for example, right? For me, it's always been, that's an accomplishment, not an aim, if anything, right? So because I just grew up always thinking, for me, medicine has always been a vocation rather than a business. So, you sort of bumble along, you learn how to run something and it goes, right? But you never sort of thing. Whereas I think people who grew up in that kind of hard business world where their parents were like that, probably therefore go into it automatically because it's ingrained in them around the dining table that this is how you make money, this is how you do it, and they already have the knowledge. I don't think there was any deep thinking like that.
A moment of epiphany.
That's exactly. It's just you sort of bumble along and you find your path. And then you think, geez, you're actually a bit like your parents, so you learn from them to improve it a bit. Like I always say, like my mom, like when I exercise a lot, and my mom would say, oh, you're pushing yourself too much. And I say, look, it's like this, right? And families, people say, I want to be just like you. But from your parents, like even you will see things in them that they could have probably prevented. So you start working on them. So it's very funny, but listen, my dad's got Alzheimer's. So this mind diet in the book was a big part of me because, I need to biohack my genes. So I'm not going to get it. So you're not saying actually, you're not saying I want to be just like my dad. You're like, no, I'm not wanting to end up like you, right? In a nicest sort of way.
From his non-fiction books on science and medicine to novels and poetry, Dr. Sharad seems to have mastered the art of going between genres and subjects as a writer.
It's largely because I'm always curious, so I'm always learning new things. I've written fiction, non-fiction, poetry, medical textbooks, right? Let's say you are writing a story, right? Always break it down when I teach. I teach creative writing to lower decile schools. We still do some programs, but schools are a bit more bogged down in structures these days. And so the structure of a story is you set the context first, then you develop your characters, and then you resolve conflicts. But if you stop and think about it, that's actually the basis for scientific research. That's the basis for your diagnosis. That's a basis for many things. So I actually think it helps my medical work because you've got to put things in context, right? So what I mean is that's the very first thing is somebody comes in and they've got a particular condition. You should be straight away thinking, what is the context here? Is, what is their lifestyle, or what is their cultural background, or what are they doing, or what are the risks here? Before you start delving into the pathology, which is more like your characteristics, right? And then things which don't gel are what you're resolving. So I actually think to a large part, storytelling as a form helps science, or it helps medical diagnosis.
So to his latest book now. In a world obsessed with quick fixes, hacks, and pop science advice on social media and a glut of podcasts on well-being, it would pay to be mindful of blind spots and biohacking gimmicks and claims, one would think.
The funny thing about it is, if you ask me, it's not one of my deepest, more philosophical books. Like maybe there would be Skin, a biography. But unfortunately now, people have shorter attention spans. And people also don't want more detailed, heavy stuff as a journalist that you're probably interested in. The average person wants, give me 10 things which are beneficial, right? And the evidence, right? So basically this book has a lot of information like that. Like, for example, there is a mind diet which can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by up to 50%. And this is quite groundbreaking. It's quite incredible. Like, even when I was researching for it, I was like, wow, because there's no real medication. My dad has Alzheimer's, so it was a personal interest for me. And in the book, I talk about why those medications failed and all that kind of stuff. But so therefore, there are things you can do in your diet which can actually reduce your risk significantly. So not only at a personal interest, so therefore you're like, what is this diet, right? So obviously it's a book of lists like that. These are things you can do. Similarly, why are our autism kind of rates, going up globally? What are the things which have been shown? So it's actually got a lot of book of lists. So in a way it is hacking because so modern people understand exactly, you defined hacking, like what you said was literally perfectly put. And literally that's what it is. So what are things you can do to change something, right? Or modify something is literally a hack, right? So the biohacking genes, it was meant to be a more user-friendly, dumbed-down list kind of a book. But it actually hit number 1 on Amazon Kindle last month. And I think it's been in the top 10 all the time, right?
So in this pursuit of optimal or peak human performance, where do supplements come in? And in context of skin here, we're consumers in a market flooded with oral skin supplements. Is that a hack that he gives any time to in his latest book?
The problem with those supplements, why they don't work, is fundamentally what happens in the human body is when you increase something, the consumption of something, the utilization by the body also goes up. So most of it gets excreted, but also you don't know, is it going to trigger something else? So that doesn't translate other than saying, okay, I've given you more this vitamin, so that vitamin level's gone up. It's not a direct translation into better health. Once you put it in to your body, you can't then control. It's the same thing I've often asked from a skin care point of view, because that's my research interest as well, is on like collagen taken
Internally,
orally, right? It just gets digested, right? Because if you think about it, collagen is just meat, right? So from animal products. So if you eat collagen and then the collagen gets digested by the body, and then of course it goes into your gut, and of course it may repair your gut or something like that. But if you think about it from an evolutionary biology point of view, we develop cancers when we are older, typically, and there are always exceptions, and we lose our beauty when we are older, right? Because we're past our reproductive peak. So from an evolutionary point of view, you're no more of use once you're past that peak. So that's how other diseases start happen, and you no longer look attractive because from an evolutionary biology point of view, your purpose is done.
Sounds brutal, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the genes, that's how like Richard Dawkins writing about selfish gene. Fundamentally, the genes are loyal to the species, not to the individuals, right? So your genes aren't going to be loyal to Kadambari. They're thinking if you do things which are bad for your health, your genes, they're going to produce bad proteins. They're just protein makers, and they're going to give you bad health effects. They're not thinking, I need to look after you, right?
As an individual.
As an individual.
Right? Yeah.
And we human beings tend to think of things like in an ownership model, right? It's saying, my car or whatever, my genes. They're not. They're like genes came over the species. So because of it, any of these things, if you do things which are not suited for your genes, then you have an adverse effect. So similarly, you were taking collagen.
But those are individual though, right? I mean, your genetic makeup is individual to you.
Absolutely, to some degree, but majority of them are common, right? So what I mean is, yes, from a point of view, we may all have, that's why there's some universal rules. We know why exercising is good for us, because if you don't exercise, we produce enough bad proteins, which are generally, there's no study which has shown that in any human being that being sedentary is great for you. So there's some universal rules. If you're drinking too much alcohol, or if you're smoking, for example, there is nobody who has a genetic tendency to be fine with it, right? So the individual differences, which is one of my interests, is really comes to the fine tuning of it, which is beyond like, is caffeine good for you? For example, for some people, caffeine may actually be really good. For some people, it may cause, palpitations, this and that, and you can pick those kind of people. But those are at that diet, lifestyle kind of end. But broadly speaking, they're the same. And of course, some genes, everything is nature and nurture. So sometimes you inherit. So you inherit 50 roughly. So look, if you inherit a cancer gene from your parents, then you do have a higher risk. You can still take lifestyle modification things to mitigate that somewhat, but you need to be more vigilant. That's the general rule. So same sort of thing like we were saying earlier is if you consume collagen, it goes in your body and it may do some helpful things in your bowel or may go to your joints or whatever, but it's not the last thing it's going to be thinking is beauty. It's not going to be thinking, Kadambari wants her face to look better, I better go and fix it, right?
I mean, that would be great, wouldn't it? But then what about the more circuitous way of looking at it, gut health then being equivalent to better skin health, and in that sense it
absolutely
does.
But it is only going in, you're not actually taking the microbiome in, right? So the gut health to a large degree is dependent on your microbiome, right?
And doesn't collagen impact that? Not at all?
No, it basically, collagen, anything you take can impact your microbiome, but collagen is fundamentally more a protein. So, it's amino acids which are useful for repairing things, and typically, your cartilages and your joints and things like that. So it might repair places which may need repair, right? But so it may therefore secondarily impact, but no one takes collagen just to modify your microbiome as you might do if you're taking fermented foods, for example, right?
What's the most current, well, I'd say, popular subject that people approach you with when it comes to biohacking?
I think, to me, to be honest, if it's a female, it's always skin, right? And if it's a male, largely it's more longevity, right? Look, my focus is health span rather than lifespan. And I think, look, there are only 3 types of people. I think humanity is all one genetically, so we're one people. So within it, we have 3 types of different beliefs. So either you're Judeo-Christian, Islamic, all 3 believe in heaven or hell, right? So you think you go to heaven or you go to hell. and then your Eastern, the Hindu, Buddhist, Shinto, all get reincarnated, right? So you believe then you can get reincarnated till you break the cycle. Or you can be greeny, atheist, and you get recycled by earthworms, right? But in all these three, what is common as you, Kadambari, Misha, you're not going to come back in this form. Right. So the commonality in all of it is that. So what I think is, this is your only chance. So make the most of it. And therefore, my focus is optimizing performance. So the biohacking I'm talking about is not the super cutting edge, unproven end. I don't recommend any infusions or rapamycin or this or that, which can be harmful. But I'm recommending things which can optimize your performance to be the best you can be every day, so that you can get out of enough energy, not lose your memory, live. I don't know, something might get me and I may not live very long, and that's okay. I'm cool with that. I don't want to necessarily live long, but I think while you are here, it's best that you have your best life.
Dr. Sharad Paul on his latest offering, Biohacking Your Genes, 25 Laws for a Smarter, Healthier and Longer Life. My name is Kadambari Raghukumar, and each week I produce an episode of Here Now featuring people from all around the world sharing their remarkable stories and journeys with me. Today's episode was mixed by Jeremy Ansell. You can catch more Here Now episodes on all your favourite podcast platforms, as well as the RNZ website, where you might find some videos and photographs accompanying the podcast as well. Thanks for listening.